Hello there, and welcome to another video. I've got a fun one today, and a bit different to usual. I was recently made aware that another creator responded critically to my video, Everything is Empty. I genuinely welcome criticism, especially when it forces me to clarify ideas that are difficult to express clearly and ideas that I am aware that I am fallible in expressing. Now, in this video, I'm not trying to win an argument or prove that I'm right. What I'm wanting to do is respond to some of the criticisms that this person has made. I want to clarify what I meant, respond to some misunderstandings which are common when it comes to complex topics like these, and reflect on why the confidence and certainty that he brings into this debate are poor substitutes for truth. Now, all in all, I'm most surprised that a stranger stumbled upon my thoughts and took the time to comment on them, as people do on the videos, let alone for him to record himself watching me and talking about that. So for that, I'm pretty grateful. And I'm also grateful to you who right now are taking the time to listen to my thoughts, and I hope that they can be somewhat helpful. Now, as I'll show, this man by the name of Jimbob commented on my video and said that he would tear apart what I was talking about, and then he did so a couple of days later. Now, I want to also preface this by saying that from the beginning, we are approaching this from very different angles. So Jimbob's response is largely rhetorical and evaluative. Moving quickly into humor, which I understand as it's a live format. He's live streaming for his viewers and is trying to entertain them by tearing me down in what is a pretty funny way. My interest is, however, not the same. It is philosophical and psychological clarification. So what I want to do is slow down and try to respond to the underlying claims that he's making. And there are moments where, as you'll see, his response shifts from critique of ideas to a critique of my character, which is okay because some of it is understandable. However, I'm going to set aside those and engage with the philosophical points instead. Now, to summarize my position from the original video, I am not claiming that nothing exists, that nothing matters, or that all views are equally valid. I am not a materialist. I am not a nihilist. I am not a relativist. These are all terms that our friend has labeled me with in the short amount of my video that he watched. What I'm claiming is that human beings lack the ability to ultimately justify anything, and that when we examine our beliefs honestly, we find that all of them rest on unprovable assumptions, linguistic constructions, and pragmatic commitments rather than final, undoubtable truth. This condition is similar to what Buddhist philosophy calls emptiness. Now, it's common to misunderstand this as nihilism, but that is an interpretation which isn't quite accurate to what the concept is getting across. Instead, emptiness, as I said in the last video, refers to the absence of inherent self-grounding essence. Emptiness, to me, doesn't destroy meaning or make life meaningless. It liberates us from false absolutes, and it gives you the freedom to choose who you want to be and how you want to engage with life. So, anyway, let's get straight into it.
You know what? Let's start with this guy. I told him I'd respond to him. I think he needs to get out of this mess that he's in. He's a nobody. He's got 133 subs. This stuff shows up on my feed all the time because of what I watch. And sometimes I can't help but respond to it. I want to help him by smashing his view.
I'm not a very public figure or a very popular figure, and I don't need to be. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to compete for attention and captivate my viewers with short quips and roasts. I'm here to think out loud about difficult ideas and to share my journey in navigating those. And I'm less interested in who is speaking, how many subscribers they have, and more interested in what's being said. And to be fair, if we're being precise, Buddhism would say that being nobody is actually the point of all that we're doing. So for that, our friend is more correct than he might think.
Everything's empty. Bro, what are you, 17? You look like you're mid-30s. We don't have time for this everything is empty stuff, okay? Fine, I'll give you a little charity, you know. I'm in my 40s. It's taken a while, okay? Fine. But you can't get away with this guy, okay? You can't go through this phase and stay there, okay?
I mean, look, I kind of get this one. You know, his video, he spent nearly 15 minutes analyzing the first 2 minutes of my 27-minute explanation. So if I were in his shoes, I'd probably say the same thing and just want the guy that was yapping to get on with it.
Anyway, let's get started with this guy, poor guy. Everything's empty. Let's just rip it apart. Let's try to be nice. Everybody in the chat, let's try to be nice. Wait a second, it's not the new year yet. Nah, never mind. We can wait until the new year to be nice, okay?
Yeah. This video is about the difference between experience and interpretation and the suffering caused by mistaking interpretations for truth. My conclusion is that everything is empty.
Wait, your conclusion is that everything's empty? Wait, is that also empty, or does that mean something?
Great question. A question that I have had myself in the past, and he is right to ask that. And yes, he is correct in his interpretation, but I am getting a sense that he is misunderstanding philosophical skepticism as well as Buddhist emptiness, which isn't an insult. You know, he is confused coming from a metaphysical worldview that assumes fixed foundations, and the ideas that I'm presenting that are also found in ancient Eastern and Western traditions are genuinely counterintuitive. So I can understand why it doesn't make sense, but hopefully as he watches my video, he will be clear why that is the conclusion that I've come to.
What should we believe? His name is Christos, dude. The dude's name is, he's literally Christa. He's Seth. His name is Christos. Wow, I didn't even see that. Dude, you need some giant white teeth. Okay, so his words are empty, so we shouldn't listen to his words that everything's empty, but go on.
Or at least it appears to be.
Wait, it appears to be? So wait, how the world appears isn't empty, right? That's weird.
Yeah, it is a little bit weird. What I'm saying is that things are empty. And later I also explain that truth is ultimately inaccessible. So when I say that things appear empty, I'm planting a seed for why that is. I'm avoiding saying that things simply are empty because that would be too strong a claim to make from what appears to be to me. I'm not certain about anything, so I prefer to say they appear empty. So it seems that this nuance was missed here, given how subtle the idea is. So I understand where he's coming from.
By the way, here's a real fun, aside from the relativism that's really obvious here, something I've been thinking about lately is that I've been thinking about the preconditions for like people having knowledge and evaluating and things. And the world needs to be structured in such a way that it has a continued flow of unity and multiplicity. It has to have function. It has to be operative, and so when you think about how silly this position is that this guy is going through, poor guy, is that he's arguing that it's all meaningless, but even to come to the conclusion of meaningless or some sort of nihilism, to come to that conclusion, you're still relying on a whole slew of things that need to be regular and functional. And then got me thinking about purpose a lot, how the breaking away from a Christian view and practice leads people to this postmodern relativistic view where truth itself is inverted or can be anything you want, like Oprah Winfrey. But also you deny that there's purposefulness. That means you deny disorders. And you notice that the trend of the denial of universals, the denial that the world is made in a particular way and it has purpose, such that we could deviate from that purposefulness. We can actually move away from it. I make this argument with evolution that the body and all of its appendages and its operations have some purpose and direction in what they do. There's a purpose to the liver. There's a purpose to the brain and the heart and the body and the skin and the bones. It's purposeful. Only from the view that it's purposeful can you go into the doctor and say, hey, listen, this thing isn't functioning properly. So when you lose the metaphysical structure that you're using to look at the world, if you lose it, you lose your standard for deviating from something. You can't really say something is disordered. And look at where we are. Lo and behold, the philosophies that move away from Christianity, that present subjectivity, nihilism, epistemic nihilism, all of these stupid broken views, they can't really tell you something isn't functioning properly.
I want to begin this part of the response by clarifying a crucial distinction that is very often missed. Emptiness is not nihilism and has nothing to do with nihilism. Nihilism claims that nothing has value or meaning, that life, objects, and experiences are inherently meaningless. By contrast, emptiness teaches that value and meaning are not metaphysically guaranteed. They don't exist as absolute, inherent properties of reality independent of human experience. This doesn't deny meaning, it relocates it. Meaning does exist, but it exists at a human level as a construct or shared understanding, not as an ultimate, unchanging feature of the universe. Now, about function and purpose. This is where nuance and subtlety is essential. When he says that the body's organs have a purpose, that depends on how we look at it. At the physics level, particles and atoms don't really seem to have an identifiable purpose. At the biology level, different body parts serve functions. The heart pumps blood, the lungs oxygenate. But even these biological purposes are descriptions from a human perspective. We see goals and ends because we interpret systems teleologically, which means that we see things as goal-directed. Body parts themselves just do what they do. They just do what they do. Their purposes and whether they're fulfilling their purpose comes in at a human level of interpretation, not at an ultimate level. And if he thinks it does, that needs a justification which we're not going to find. Now this leads to a key point. We don't need to invoke metaphysical or cosmic purpose to identify dysfunction or disorder. For example, a heart can malfunction. This is a factual biological condition we can observe, measure, and treat, but this doesn't imply the person is morally or existentially defective. You can say that an organ is disordered without needing to say that a human being's whole life or existence is disordered because of that. This distinction is very important, but because of its nuance and subtlety, it is often overlooked. Our friend also mentioned that if we lose a metaphysical structure for purpose, then we lose standards to say something is disordered or not functioning properly. I would suggest that that is something that we in philosophy call a category error, a mistake of mixing different philosophical categories. There are different levels of meaning and domains of discourse. When we talk about an organ's function, we're in a biological and pragmatic domain. We use scientific observation and agreed upon criteria that serves the purpose we've created it for. When we talk about what makes life worth living, or moral and existential meaning, we move beyond the domain of objective science into subjective and existential realms. Using metaphysical purpose as a foundation for all meaning conflates these levels and misunderstands the way humans construct meaning and norms. And finally, the idea that embracing emptiness or epistemic skepticism means denying any functionality, order, or standards is just mistaken. One can acknowledge the lack of absolute metaphysical guarantees while fully accepting that within certain frameworks like biology, medicine, ethics, or personal values, standards, purposes, and functions are real, effective, and meaningful. However, they are real within certain frameworks.
And that's kind of the big complaint that the right wing would have of the left, is that they just don't accept that there's anything that's proper. There's no proper sex. There's no proper marriage. There's no proper truth. There's no proper family structure. There's no proper church. There's no proper anything. Everything is, just an iteration of your will and your whim, and that's it.
So at this point, he brings in a political interpretation and makes a very broad generalization about the left, saying that what it ends up being is an iteration of your will and your whim, and that's it. Now there's a kernel of truth here, of conventional truth, that humans do seem to have whims and that our will can fluctuate. But his statement lacks nuance. Giving in to every whim isn't helpful or healthy, but neither is denying the shared values and commitments that many people cultivate over time. Humans often share parts of their wills with others, and through striving and reflection, our wills can influence and shape our whims in a way. It's a dynamic, ongoing process. If Jimbob were honest, he would also acknowledge that his own beliefs are shaped by his will. He finds his views convincing because his will drives him to them, just as anyone else's will shapes their convictions. For example, Christianity promotes kindness and forgiveness, as Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." And later in this video, we will see a lack of this kindness in his tone, showing how his own whims sometimes override what he believes his will or principles are. So not only is he arguing against nihilism, relativism, and left-wing politics, which, by the way, have little to do with what I'm talking about or the Buddhist concept of emptiness, but the criticism he attaches to nihilism, relativism, and left-wing politics are ironically visible in his own behavior. Even the idea of truth, and that this is the most honest position in psychology or philosophy that I have been able to find.
That's a contradiction, buddy. I hope you're watching this. I told him I was going to do a loving review of him. And by loving, I mean bruising. You can't say truth, this is the honest truth. Honesty assumes truth, dude. You can't just say all the statements you just said and still maintain that there's something called universal truth, man. Okay, bro?
So,
get a drink of water for us, would you? My misophonia is kicking up.
So, where to start? I didn't say that this is the honest truth. I just didn't say that. Honesty doesn't require a claim to universal truth. I'm not maintaining that there is a universal truth. Our friend seems to think I'm saying the ultimate truth is that there is no truth, and then accuses me of contradiction, saying that there must be truth if the truth is that there is no truth. But this uncharitable reading misses the bigger picture. What I'm actually saying is that truth, as we humans try to access it, is ultimately unreachable with the tools we have. And that is when we define truth as ultimately a justified belief, something that is ultimately justifiable. When we use the tools that humans have access to, such as reason, logic, and faith and feeling, what we typically find is emptiness. And the thing is, I can't just repeat this sentence over and over or express it perfectly. Sometimes I fumble because these ideas are challenging for me. And in saying that, I can understand why he's confused about the interpretation that I'm presenting. Now, he also says that honesty assumes truth, and that I can't say what I said without assuming universal truth. But honesty, as I'm using it, means being faithful and transparent about my own experience and what seems most reasonable from my perspective, not asserting an absolute universal truth that everyone must accept. Saying that this is the most honest position I can come to is a statement about my epistemic stance. It reflects humility about what can be known, not a metaphysical claim that this is the one true view for all time and all people. Now, this brings me back to a distinction that I made in that video, which is the difference between experience and interpretation. You, watching this and that video, can hear the same words as he does, but perhaps your mindset allows you to interpret them differently. Our friend, live streaming and aiming to entertain, seems to interpret my statements in the least charitable way possible, projecting his dislike for nihilism, relativism, and left-wing politics onto what I'm saying about human knowledge. Unfortunately, this means that he misses the point and misses the opportunity to engage with it sincerely. Though I do find it amusing to see him roast me, and that he suggested that I get a drink of water. I probably should hydrate better, but as we can see, Jimbob doesn't appear to be a fan of ASMR and the wonderful sounds that the human mouth can make sometimes. Now, more importantly, he treats every statement as if it must be a metaphysical truth claim. So every sentence that I'm making, he is cherry-picking that and saying that it doesn't make sense. Now, in the way he's doing it, it doesn't make any sense at all. I wouldn't agree with what I'm saying either. But the thing is, I'm not doing metaphysics here. I'm not making metaphysical claims. I am doing phenomenology. I'm talking about human experience. Saying that truth is unreachable in my experience is not the same as saying it is true that there is no truth. I'm talking about the limits of human cognition, and I'm not declaring about the nature of reality itself. And make sure you stay hydrated. Truth is often said to be derived from knowledge. This is the common view held by everyday society, the scientific tradition, and many religious people, spiritual people, and philosophers, dating back to even Plato and the beginnings of ancient Greek philosophy.
Well, no, that wouldn't be at least an orthodox view, that truth is derivative of knowledge. We would go further. Knowledge would be a temporal thing. We would say that you can use your experience and use your senses and use your evaluations to gain some knowledge, and then you could call that the propositions about that truth. But no, it doesn't derive from, because knowledge now needs something to derive. You need something that knowledge is derivative of now. So it doesn't solve the problem. That's why a theonomous view that starts with God is really the only logical way to approach knowledge. Autonomous, which he's trying to argue for, it gets you into these pickles. If you argue autonomous epistemology, that everything's sort of grounded in the particulars of each human trying to seek out truth from their own inductive experiences, you don't have anything. You just have nominalism. So
Very interesting. So he argues that truth isn't derivative of knowledge, and that knowledge is a temporal thing, something we gain through experience and senses, forming propositions about that truth. He then questions, if knowledge is derivative in my worldview, what is it derivative of? He claims that without God as the ultimate foundation, this leads to an unsolvable problem. According to him, the theonomous view, starting with God as the ultimate ground, is the only logically consistent way to approach knowledge. However, in my video, I explore my own hypothesis and how choosing any ultimate foundation, whether it is God or consciousness or something else, is ultimately an arbitrary stopping point in the chain of justification. This is a classic problem in epistemology known as the regress problem. While positing God as the ultimate foundation logically ends the infinite regress, it doesn't provide an epistemic justification for that choice. It's a logical solution, but it's not necessarily a metaphysical proof or a metaphysical truth. Put simply, just because a belief system is logically consistent doesn't mean it corresponds to how reality actually is. It's important to distinguish logical coherence, which Jimbob believes he has, from epistemic or metaphysical certainty, which he may believe he has, but that is ultimately unjustifiable. On the other hand, the autonomous or secular view accepts that knowledge is grounded in human experience, observation, and inductive reasoning. And this approach often aligns with nominalism, the philosophical position that universals or general concepts are names or labels created by humans, rather than independent or metaphysical entities. Nominalism is sometimes misunderstood as denying truth or reality, but in fact it simply recognizes that our concepts are constructed to help us navigate the world. They are useful tools and not eternal essences. So what does it mean that knowledge is derivative? Our critics' point relates to the regress problem, that every claim to knowledge seems to require justification, and that justification itself requires further justification, potentially leading to an infinite chain. To avoid this, foundationalists propose basic beliefs that don't need further support. The theonomous view claims God as that basic belief. My position, however, embraces epistemic humility. We acknowledge the limits of what we can justify and accept provisional stopping points or practical foundations without metaphysical certainty. I don't pretend to have ultimate, indubitable knowledge as much as I'd like that. Rather, I do my best with the tools that are available to me, and I recognize their limits. This approach is neither nihilistic nor relativistic. It is a recognition of human cognitive limits. Moreover, many epistemologists propose alternatives to foundationalism, like coherentism, where beliefs justify each other in a network, or contextualism, where justification depends on practical context. And these are meant to avoid infinite regress without appealing to metaphysical absolutes. So there are alternatives to what he's saying. We just aren't considering them in depth right now. So in sum, the theonomous view approach ends the regress logically with God, but this is a faith-based assumption, not a proven metaphysical fact. The autonomous approach accepts human experience and reasoning as provisional foundations, accompanied by epistemic humility. Nominalism reframes universals as conceptual tools, not metaphysical realities, which doesn't deny truth but acknowledges how we construct knowledge. And mature epistemology acknowledges limits, embraces provisionality, and avoids unjustified metaphysical leaps. So this is the position that I am trying to express, and I myself wouldn't call it an autonomous approach or nominalist. I am just trying to be honest about what can be known, rather than being certain and feeling certain about what is absolutely true.
No wonder he looks the way he does, and he sounds the way he does. He's ultimately defeated. The good news, Christos, his name's Christos. The good news, sir, is that what you're experiencing as a defeat is proper, is a proper experience to the worldview. Because what's happening is that it's your worldview that's getting defeated. Good. Get a better one, man. Get a better one, dude.
Emptiness is not a defeat. It's actually the opposite in my interpretation. It is the liberation from the exhausting game of pretending that there's some absolute truth when there really isn't one to be found. It's liberation from the exhausting conflict and competition that goes on between people believing that they are right and the other is wrong. So if anything, I don't think it's a defeat, and I don't feel defeated. It feels freer. But I do get why a view such as his will see it as a defeat from the outside. It's a dominant perspective, the foundation upon which religions promote themselves and societies organize. There are clear rights and wrongs, clear purposes, clear meanings. There is clarity in what one is to do with their life, who they are, and how to make their way in the world. That through logic and reason, we can access justified, true beliefs about reality and live our lives in a way that reflects these beliefs. And that some people's beliefs are incoherent, whereas some people's are truer. This is a source of much conflict over the course of humanity's evolution. And
oh, you think we evolved now? You think we evolved? Okay. Okay, buddy.
So I found his reaction to my claim that we've evolved quite interesting. Earlier in his video, he did bring up evolution himself, along with arguments about how organs have specific purposes. Now, I don't know in depth as to whether he agrees or disagrees with evolution in a Darwinian sense, and I'm not here to prove that. Regardless of his personal beliefs, surely he and you and I can all agree that since the time that religions were founded and began until today, our beliefs and understanding have evolved. They have gradually changed over time, and I hope that that's in a positive direction, and that this evolution has sometimes caused significant conflict. Think of events like the Crusades, the Great Schism, or even modern persecution of Christians in some parts of the world. That said, I do get his interpretation of my statement is influenced by his role as an entertainer, aiming to engage his viewers and assert himself as the ultimate judge of right and wrong. But yeah, there's just not much there. I would say much unnecessary conflict, because the truth is that all these views are incoherent in some way.
Really? From what ultimate view did you determine that? Because I might agree with you. But the problem here, buddy, is that you can't say all views are incoherent without assuming one view that isn't. And this is the confusion that these philosophy people get into, because they think they've arrived at some sort of universal claim that there's no real ultimate truth. And what they're arguing for is, well, all of these views are ultimately incoherent at some point. Well, no, there has to be one view, the one that you happen to be using, to determine that every other view is incoherent. That requires one non-incoherent view, dude. That's a truth claim. You're making a massive truth claim here. Is your truth claim incoherent? How do you know that?
So he says that you can't say all views are incoherent without assuming one view isn't. And he's accusing me of making a massive truth claim. Here's the thing though. If you take the statement, all these views are incoherent, which are the sounds that came out of my mouth, if you take them completely out of context and without any charity, it can sound like a sweeping truth claim. But that is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that all views, including mine, face inherent limitations because our methods for seeking certainty are imperfect and ultimately fallible. So any claim to absolute truth is at best provisional and at worst dishonest. I'm not making a truth claim about truth itself. Rather, from my vantage point, using the tools available to me and acknowledging our inability to achieve ultimate justification, any claim that purports to possess final certainty is incoherent. And if I were to claim that there was no truth, I'd have to hold my own views to that standard as well, which I don't. I embrace this inherent limitation. I recognize that there's contradiction and paradox in views, and I don't pretend otherwise. Because
Get some water, dude. Get some water.
for humans, truth itself is an incoherent concept.
Oh, gosh. Truth itself is an incoherent concept. The truth claim coming from the guy saying truth itself is an incoherent concept. That's a truth claim. I was trying to be nice to you.
I was trying. Now I want to beat you up. Now I want to curb stomp you. You get the whole house in the chat song. What a doomer.
I had to go into my editing bag for that one. And I'm sorry, I had to fast forward through some of it. That is not the original clips. But yeah, I didn't want to waste your time. I did want you to experience some of it just like I did. Because at the end of the day, we are all in this together. If I could go back and have a sip of water, I probably wouldn't. I'm too keen to get this information out, and I don't want to waste a second. Now, about the claim, truth itself is an incoherent concept. He says that's a truth claim again, and here we are back at the same point. Now, I can get why from his shoes, this would be pretty frustrating. It would feel like he's banging his head against a brick wall, and he feels like he's solved it. He has said that this is a self-defeating position to have and doesn't make any sense. Now, in the vacuum, yeah, fair enough. You know, sometimes I say things like, the truth is there is no truth, because it sounds dramatic or poetic, and I'll admit that that's not a perfect or faithful summary of my worldview, but to live is to engage, and, you know, I attempt to throw my hat into the ring and present what I believe. But to be fair, like, even if I said truth appears to be incoherent rather than said truth is incoherent, he would call that a truth claim too. And as soon as he says it's a truth claim, he believes that I've contradicted myself. Now, in my worldview, the one I'm trying to express here, these aren't truth claims. They're descriptions of my experience using the tools we have. I'm trying to keep away from the word truth when I'm talking about what I believe. It's not about truth in the usual sense anymore. This capital T truth, which refers to something ultimately justifiable. Now, if I talk about truth, it is the truth of my experience, which isn't ultimately justifiable. It's the way it appears. So his worldview is built on purpose, that what someone says must aim to be true. So if I say there's no truth, that feels hypocritical to him because it seems like I'm breaking the rule of my own belief system. But my purpose isn't to assert absolute truth. It's honest expression of my experience. I'm not interested in truth. I'm not really interested in knowing the truth as it's commonly understood, because as I demonstrated in my 27-minute video, I don't think that's possible. However, I don't think he's quite understood that, because at this point he's listened to just under 2 minutes of what I have to say. To be extra clear, just to confirm, when I say truth itself is incoherent, I'm not claiming this as an objective fact about reality that everyone must accept. I'm describing my experience of trying to grasp truth using the tools available to humans, our language, reasoning, and perception, which all have limits when they're investigated closely. It's more like saying, from where I stand, the idea of absolute truth doesn't hold up, rather than saying it is an absolute fact that there is no truth. Think of it like a weather report. I can say it feels cloudy to me right now, which is an honest description of my perception, but it's not a statement that the sky must be cloudy everywhere or that it is cloudy in an ultimate sense. So these are phenomenological or epistemic statements. They describe how things appear to me, not metaphysical truths that dictate how reality must be. Now, the confusion for Jimbob arises because many people approach these ideas and the ideas of others expecting clear-cut universal truths that can be objectively verified or verified based on some fundamental principle. They assume that every statement must assert a fact about how reality absolutely is to make a metaphysical truth claim. But the problem is that I'm not doing that. I'm speaking from a place of epistemic humility and phenomenological description. That means that I'm describing my experience and the limits of human knowing, not asserting absolute facts that everyone must agree with. This means that my statements are about how truth appears or behaves from the human perspective. They're reflections on our cognitive and linguistic tools, not declarations about the ultimate nature of reality. Because of this, interpreting my words as contradictory truth claims is a category mistake, which we also saw before. It's applying the wrong kind of logic or expectation to the type of statement being made. And so this is exactly what it means to rely on animal faith, the instinctive foundational trust that we place in certain beliefs or assumptions without ultimate proof, simply because we have no other choice if we want to navigate life and make meaning. Now, I apologize if it feels like I am saying the same thing over and over again in every response, but I am sincerely trying to respond to the same claims that he is making.
What kind of terrible doomer position is this, man? Look at your spirit. It's dead. Look at your eyes. You're dead. You died alive. You're dead alive. The truth is incoherent itself.
Yeah, fair play. I hope I don't actually sound like that. And I hope I don't look too dead in the eyes. Yeah, I guess I just try to take serious topics seriously. And I don't always show as much joy as I usually would. And that's one of the differences in how he and I are coming into this. I'm trying to express an idea that I believe is fundamental and important to me. Something that can help people potentially better understand themselves and human nature, hopefully making life a bit easier for them and relinquishing even one minuscule of suffering. Maybe I could have looked a little bit more lively, but at the same time, I wasn't trying to roast anyone and entertain my audience during a live stream. Honesty was my priority, and my body language was reflecting that. Now, this isn't something I'm saying about truth metaphysically, but it's something that I'm saying about our ability to access it epistemically. And even that sentence, which I've just said about truth, is in itself incoherent.
Oh, man, you're cooked, man. I'm not staying with you on this. You're cooked. We don't need to listen to anything else your flared nostrils have to offer us, okay? Go smell a fart. Obviously, your parents are paying your rent if you have time for this video, okay? You're done. I'm done with you. I don't want to see your face anymore. Don't show up in my comments. Don't say thank you for the review. I want you to stop uploading videos altogether. Okay? I hate you. Let's move on to one of the most pretentious.
I do need to apologize to Jimbob because despite his plea, I engaged respectfully in the comments, thanked him, and even posted this video afterwards. So while I didn't really find a common ground with him and I wasn't able to compromise with his requests, I do appreciate the exchange. So yeah, I also became a bit more conscious about flared nostrils. So thanks for pointing that out. And then just like that, he declares that he hates me. And then he rage quits and just moves on with his life. I found all of this really fascinating and wholly unexpected. I especially found it fascinating how deeply this idea of emptiness unsettled him. Emptiness being a central concept in many Eastern philosophies. And it shows that perhaps he hasn't really engaged in thoughts different from his own or been curious about them. His reaction reveals as much about his worldview and perhaps its rigidity or insecurity as it does about mine. Now, reflecting on this whole experience, which isn't that deep, but I do realize that when I began sharing my thoughts, I neither sought nor expected widespread attention or commentaries such as that. I've always been aware that I could express myself better, and I'm grateful to be challenged by someone with more experience, even if the engagement felt more personal and for entertainment purposes rather than philosophical. His critique, while at times somewhat sharp and interesting, often dismissed ideas by focusing on personal jabs and by providing shallow and superfluous interpretations rather than sincerely grappling with the concepts themselves. The approach that he took reminds me of a pattern that I explored in my master's thesis, how certain rigid fixed worldviews often found in right-leaning commentators can stifle growth and discourage open exploration, especially in younger minds, and he is one of many men who promote those kinds of views in the online sphere. Now, my belief is that at the core, every human deserves the freedom to explore, to question, and to believe what they want to. And I suspect that if people are given the space to explore, to be curious, and are treated with a sense of affirmation, that they will arrive at something which promotes a shared understanding, which respects our common humanity, and which seeks to alleviate suffering for them and others. I don't think that it'll just end in hedonism and nihilism, but who's to say? All I can speak to is my experience. To you watching this, thank you for your time and attention. Wherever you are in the world, it's an honor to be heard, even if briefly. And if you'd like to share your thoughts, I'd really appreciate in the comments letting me know what you think. It always brightens my day, seeing someone share their own perspective, because it helps light a lamp in the dark recesses of the unknown, which I find in my mind. As for my critic, I see the arguments that he brought forward as very predictable and somewhat disappointing, ultimately resting on a leap of faith justified by reason or faith. It's circular at the end of the day. In my own pursuit, that leap and that grasping for certainty is much less interesting than the questions themselves and engaging with them sincerely. It is less interesting than questioning the nature of the question and the questioner. It's just a couple of levels deeper than our friend was willing to go. But still, I respect his willingness to engage with a nobody sharing thoughts on human nature. I didn't and don't expect universal agreement or kindness, but what I do value is the chance to clarify and deepen my understanding. My intention isn't to convince everyone, but to honestly share my experience of the limits of certainty and what it means to be human. If what I've shared resonates with you, that's lovely, and if it doesn't, that's also lovely. Ultimately, it's all okay. And if I may add one small suggestion for my critic, if he views this, perhaps it might be worth exploring a bit more about alternate beliefs with an open and curious mind, such as Buddhist philosophy, because it might offer new and helpful understandings of your own approach to existence. There is a lot to take from different worldviews and different approaches to everyday life. Sometimes I've noticed that when we hold really tightly to one worldview, it can be hard to fully appreciate others, which is something I'm genuinely striving to avoid in my own thinking. So thanks again for your time. This is not a video I would usually make, but nevertheless, it's good to try something different. So I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for some more psychological and philosophical thoughts in the near future. Sending you lots of metta and all the best.